Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Unvarnished. I am Chris Hyde, the Creative and Marketing Director at D-Scoop. And today we have a guest who's been in the industry for decades and has vast experience in sales, marketing, content creation, research, all kinds of stuff that's going to be so valuable for you to hear. It's Karen Kimerer. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, can we just start with just giving us a little bio of yourself, what your experience and what you're doing now?
I'll try not to span it over the entire decades that I've been in the industry. Um, I'm from the Pacific Northwest. Love it out here. I've spent most of my career, as you mentioned, in sales, marketing, technology. In fact, funny story, give a little nod to the AL West champions out here, the Seattle Mariners. I started my print awareness career at Seattle Mariners. So I was supporting the sales team at the time. I was doing all the commission reports and making all their flyers. And the way we had to make flyers at that point is I would use my IBM Selector typewriter to type up the copy. And then we cut and paste logos from both the Mariners team and the opposing team coming into town. And sadly, at that time, they were so bad, the Mariners, that we would typically promote the stars of the incoming team. And so I'd make these mailers, we'd copy them off on a big EchoPrint Kodak device, and they'd mail them all out to everybody. And as I was watching their behavior, the salespeople's behavior, I realized that they were probably spending only about a third of the time selling. And there was a really big gap in their income and mine because I prepared their commission reports. And so when my IBM Selector typewriter service person came in to make some repairs for me, I asked him about sales opportunities, and the rest was history. So my initial official entry into sales was selling IBM, both typewriters and then eventually word processors. Moved over to color copiers, ended up at Xerox, and then had some excellent mentors. And Barb Pello, who I think everyone knows in the industry, was my mentor and encouraged me to make the leap into working at InfoTrends at the time, now Keypoint Intelligence. So I've been off on my own for a little bit, but Keypoint Intelligence is one of my favorite customers and still a large part of my business.
Awesome. All right, cool. Then let's just jump into sales, marketing, all that good stuff.
Perfect.
Really tap into your expertise here. All right. So how have buyer expectations for print kind of changed? Not just even over time and since the pandemic, for that matter.
I think the most prevalent change that we're seeing as we are looking at the buyers out there is they're really looking for a streamlined process. Everybody likes to know that they can go online and buy something and have it delivered right away. And they're looking for perfection. So it used to be that there was some leniency and forgiveness when things didn't go well. And we're seeing that change quite dramatically, is that the buyers out there in today's world are really looking for a seamless experience. But if you dig deeper, what we're learning is what they really want is they want to buy from people that are going to help them with their print outperforming what it used to do. And so what I mean by that is it used to be just transactional, right? So buyers would buy transactional print and they'd be happy. And now buyers are really, because it's stretched for marketing money, they're really looking at what printer can help me optimize the effectiveness of my print. And so it's a different layer of conversations that we're having now when you put a salesperson in front of a print buyer, and a lot of them aren't even print buyers. A lot of them are department heads that are responsible for buying print. But it's a much different conversation now because they're looking for that business outcome versus just ink on paper.
Okay, so you kind of already preempted the next question I was going to have, which was, what are they looking for beyond pricing? But now I have a follow-up question to your answer, which is they want their print to be more effective.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not transactional. So what does that mean? Like, what does more effective print look like to a customer?
The more effective print, and again, obviously we're seeing print volumes come down, right? And we're seeing a lot of competing ways to communicate with the brand's audience. And so what the buyers are looking for is if effectiveness in how they are reaching their customer and how that response is coming back to them, the return on investment. So they're looking for things that are going to help them get maximum marketing dollars out of each connection and contact, meaning personalized print, engagement, interactivity. They're looking for their print to stand out and help support their other marketing channels, but be a part of that effectively and not just at volumes that they used to buy previous days.
Okay. So does that mean you said personalization? Is that embellishment? Is that different integrations with omni-channel, QR
Mm.
codes, all those things? Is it that kind of additional like value add services that you would consider?
Well, I think it's interesting when you ask that question because I kind of go into marketing segment mode. The answer is yes, they are looking for those things, but it also depends on who you're talking to. So, take for example a mid market printer versus a communication print uh, organization that really specializes in print and communication. And so when you're looking at who you're selling to, some people are looking for help on what can I do to get more impact out of my print, where others are saying, if you can't blend this in and provide the same colors that I'm getting on my other channels, then I can't do business with you. So it really goes back to segmenting who your customers are and understanding what they value and then putting the right solutions in front of them. So I would say the very small size organizations that print people are selling to, there's probably not as much concern about making the print more effective. That's on the salesperson to educate them because they're not thinking that way. But once you start getting mid-market and upmarket, the people that are buying print or print buyers, if there still are existence out there, we are seeing more people lean into those kind of conversations and leading those conversations. They're not asking for information as much as they're leading that conversation.
Okay. So where do you think the holes are or the mistakes that salespeople are making in their sales approach then,
Mm.
given what you just mentioned?
I think a lot of salespeople still struggle with the fact that, and this is something I work on all the time with sales organizations, is demonstrating their value and being able to communicate their value to the person that's speaking to. And the reason why that is such a big gap is because if we think about what the print buyer or the brand is trying to accomplish, depending on who you're speaking to, the conversation needs to change. And one of the areas that I constantly see the sales organizations falling short in is demonstrating that value to the customer. And it's because they don't understand what the customer values. And so in traditional sales, whether it be print or technology or anything else, we are as sales organizations very comfortable talking about ourselves and how long we've been in business and all the technology stacks that we have and how that's going to impact them. But what we don't understand all the time well enough, in my opinion, is the fact that the customer may value something completely different. And we need to be able to tap into that and be able to help support that to give them confidence to move forward with us. So there's a big gap in messaging and how we approach the conversations.
Any recommendations on how to approach structuring the conversations? And I guess part B of that question is how do you drill down to finding out what the customer really values?
Yeah, that's the sales skill. Yes. So you mentioned structure. I'm a big believer of structure. I've been coming from IBM and Xerox and all the other big brands out there. There's a lot of structure in their sales environments. In order to structure a conversation to make sure that you're in line with what the customers value, is you need to figure out first what they're trying to achieve. So one of the exercises I used to do when I was working with a lot of um, print salespeople is I would put a catalog on the conference table. We'd be in a sales training, put a catalog on the conference table. And I'd say, explain to me what that is. And they would come up with all the text and specs on it. Well, it's 9 by 13, full bleed, and they go on and on and on, C1S paper and how it was bound. And it get beyond that. What is the function of that product right there? What does it do to serve your customer's business? And so, to answer your question more directly, salespeople need to understand the function of print in every organization and what the expectation of that printed piece is from the customer. And once they understand that, then they can align the value to what the customer is trying to achieve.
What's the best way for them to get out of the old way of thinking into the new way of thinking?
Oh, it's not easy. Um, I really encourage organizations to continue skill development. And I know a lot of really good print companies out there have tremendous salespeople, very good at what they do. I still believe, and I am a student myself constantly, I still believe we all need to be students and we all need to understand what's changed and how we need to adapt our behavior to the change. And so I encourage every organization out there, and not because I provide it, because I'm not the only person in the industry who provides skill development, but I really encourage them to look at what that could do for their organization and how that would help them connect better with their customers. So it's discipline, right? It's practice and discipline. It's seeing what good looks like first, and then applying that in your own style, your own personality, and then just practice. And one of the things that I just got done working with some reps this week, and we put a lot of content in front of them, a lot of different structures, a lot of different tools. And so at the end of the session, I said, "How are you going to use this?" And I loved the response I got from one of the individuals. He said, "I am going to take one tool at a time, and three of the questions, we have a format for questioning that's a little different than most. And three of the questions, I'm going to practice those on my next 2 weeks of calls and get really good at them. And then I'm going to start introducing more and more." And so I think, to answer your question more directly, in order to get people out of the rhythm that they're in currently, you need to shake it up. You need to show them how these other options to connect with the customer can have a huge impact on both the customer satisfaction as well as their sales results.
You mentioned the tools. What's the toolbox look like these days? Is there a minimum level number of tools that you should be having in that toolbox?
Um, I think anybody in the industry would agree with this, that a CRM is absolutely the heartbeat of your organization when it comes to sales. Obviously, there's other tools out there on the shop floor that need to be addressed, but when it comes to sales, you must have a CRM. Data is everything. Understanding wins and losses, understanding where the customer is in their buying journey, not just where we're at in the sales process. That all resides in that CRM. So I'd say that's the first thing. Sadly, a lot of people in our industry invested in CRMs years ago. They bought more than they needed to. And so they never stood it up the way they should have. And it's become less of a value to the organizations because they don't put value on it. And I think the number one thing that every print company out there, every OEM organization out there needs to do is to make sure that their CRM is set up to match what their customers' expectations are along the buying journey, and then use it and inspect the data in it and build on that.
Okay, what's the percentage of companies
I don't know the answer.
that are doing that well
Not,
that you've come across that actually are doing that well?
not enough. I'll tell you that.
Okay, fair
Not
enough.
enough.
Fair
Not enough.
enough.
Even in the OEMs that I work with, they have investments in CRMs and they're still not being utilized. I asked the question. In fact, I asked a question this week of this team I was working with. I said, "How often are you looking at your doing postmortems, looking at why you won business or why you lost business?" And unanimously, they said, "We used to do that. We don't do that anymore." And that's kind of sad because you really don't get any insight on how you're approaching business unless you are inspecting the outcome, whether you won or lost. So I think that's a huge value. And that information needs to go in the CRM. And then you can start collecting data from the CRM going, this is our gap. This is our weakness. This is where we need to focus. These are the things this is where we stall deals out, right? So if we're getting all the way up to, I had a really good discovery call with a customer about an omni-channel campaign, and all of a sudden they're not calling me back. Why? What's the gap there? And there's no way you can unanimously understand the gap without the data to support
Interesting. Well, we could have a whole side conversation about CRMs,
it.
but all right. Omni-channel, social media, inbound marketing.
hmm
What's the state of that? Like, and how are people using that to drive sales? And is anybody doing that successfully?
Yeah, I've seen a lot. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot. I mean, I see a lot of great practices out there, and I really try to promote those. I think that um, even the people who've been in the industry for a long time, I've had people say, you taught an old dog new tricks, and it's nothing about new tricks. It's just about awareness, right? Being aware. And I would say there are really good examples of people out there that are using social media for both inbound and outbound marketing or lead generation. The things that are most successful in that, and the reason why they're having success is because it established themselves as somebody in the industry that buyers want to go to because they're sharing information. One of the things as salespeople that we forget so often is that we have a tremendous amount of market intelligence that we can share with the right boundaries that our prospects are dying to know. It's like, well, how is somebody using omnichannel? How is somebody doing different personalizations for higher impact or better results? We have all that information because we're selling it. And so in social media, to be able to create those storylines and be able to share best practices, customer case studies, they go a long way. And it's kind of like having the reviews on Yelp. If you have a couple bad reviews and you don't have any good reviews, people aren't going to call on you. But if you have a lot of really good examples and reviews, people are going, this person knows what is going on in the industry, and I think I need to talk to them. So it's a very good practice. Again, like CRMs, it's not utilized well enough. And I think the industry is finally learning not to use platforms like LinkedIn to spam people. I think that had its day, and they've learned that it's not really effective. So more and more people that I see are using a combination of social media, whether it be Pinterest to show their work. They have some great, unique images that they can share on Pinterest, a very visual platform. LinkedIn to educate, to share, information on the industry and what their customers are finding success in, and then email to back that up and directing them back there. So it's a combination, just like the omni-channel that we promote our brands to buy and invest in. The really good sales reps out there are taking that approach. They're using more than one area or one channel to create volume in their messaging and to create impact. And it's working really, really well. Unfortunately, it's again, it takes time, right? It's one of those things that people take time, and I know that in sales, there's so many other things that they have to do besides just sit in front of the customer and try to help them with their business. So it's a discipline that they have to incorporate into their day.
Pinterest.
Yeah.
I've not heard anybody mention Pinterest when it comes to marketing print.
Mm. They're actually one of the better platforms out there because it is so visual. In fact, tomorrow I'm sitting in on they have a Pinterest state of the business and how businesses are using them to achieve better advertising rates or better inbound and queries. And there's a whole methodology behind it that I wasn't even aware of until just recently. But Pinterest is a really good, and it actually came to me from one of the sales reps I was working with that they were trying it out. They were putting a lot of their products out there, and it really has been effective.
That is super cool.
Yeah.
All right, data.
Mm,
You kind of know data.
I
How
know data.
how can printers use market data to identify like their best growth opportunities out there?
Yeah. I think the market data, if they have access to market data to help them understand where the growth is in the industry, that's the first start, right? Is to understand where the growth is. But I caution people because we do a lot of, as you know, I work a lot with Key Point Intelligence and their clients, and we do a lot of vertical industry business development approaches. And even though perhaps one industry may not be growing at the rate another industry is growing in print and omni and communication, it doesn't mean they're not a good prospect. So I caution that data doesn't tell the whole story, but it gives good direction. And so when you start thinking about organizations that are selling print and communications, the data part of it is let's look at the trends. Let's understand what the trends are. Let's address that towards kind of measure that against what we do really well and what our customer base looks like. And then we can start to develop strategy. One of the biggest break fixes that we run into when we're trying to coach business owners in the print industry to provide a good success path for their salespeople is to make sure that their ideal customer is aligned with their expectations of the salespeople. So too often they have all this data that they understand that they do really well in these market segments and at this size of an organization, but they've just instructed their salespeople to go out and knock on a bunch of doors. And so what happens is it skews the results because they're getting a lot of no's, or they're bringing in work that doesn't really fit into their environment very well. So I love to look at data. I love to do a white space analysis with organizations where we look at all the things that they can offer and provide. And then we take the top, let's say 20% of their customers, 10% of the customers, and we start checking off, where do you address this with this customer? Where do you address this with this customer? And then the data, which really isn't data at that point, is the white space of all these opportunities that they can start selling into that are already there right in front of them. And then from there, they can build strategies to expand into adjacent industries or adjacent markets that look a lot like what they're already selling into. So data is critical in putting together a sales strategy for growth. Absolutely critical. Because without it, you're just shooting darts at the wall and trying to be somebody that takes orders. And that's not going to be effective.
The process, you kind of touched on it there a bit, to creating the ideal customer profile. Uh,
Mhm.
is it as easy as taking your top 5 clients? I mean, how do you approach that? How do you define like what I know that's probably a really deep question, but
Well, I'll tell you, it's not that easy because I once worked for an organization briefly that even the owner of the company and the sales leader of the company did not agree on who their ideal customer was. So it happens. It just because you get a lot of business in one area one year does not mean that that's an ideal customer. It could mean you had to bend a lot of processes to get the work through the shop. It could mean that you had to, stall your best customers' work to get this through the shop because you thought it was a huge opportunity. So to get back to the customer profile, it is starting to look at your top customers and your most profitable customers and your customers with the most loyalty to you. Those are the kinds of attributes you want to look at to say these are the kind of people we want to work with. And then you can determine based on that, get even further into the profile. Are they cyclical? Do they have more than one requirement of communication? Are they omni-channel? Are they print only? How many departments in their organization require our services? And you start building out on that. You can get very granular in personas, basically profiles, but you don't want to lock out opportunities because you want to stay within a box. So I do like to look at the top 10% of the customers and try to find the commonalities. Not forcing the commonality, but really looking at it objectively and say, what are the commonalities and why are we really good at what we do with these people? And then start pulling those apart and looking at the attributes there.
I just have been doing a little bit of reading myself on personas lately again, kind of circling around. I um, kind of dive in and out of it. What do you think is a best way to build a persona? Like, and what are the ingredients that go into it?
Mm. I think the best way to start with a persona, and it takes some time, it's not a one day kind of a project, is to work with your sales team, understand what they're running into in the industry. Again, look at your historical data, go to your MIS or ERP solutions and see what the jobs that these customers of yours, these top 10% of your customers are bringing in, how they fit into your business and how they are impacting your business, either positively or negatively. And then you start looking at the roles, you start looking at you start looking at their behaviors, right? So how were they introduced to your organization? Was it an outbound, inbound? Were they referred to you by somebody else? And so you start building all these little spider webs of impact. How did they get to be your customer? I like a persona exercise to be. We start with sales, we get their ideas, and then we bring in the other departments because again, sales have all these can often have grand ideas about what they want to do for their customers, but there's no way you're going to get that through the shop. There's no way that you can address that. So every department, I think, needs to be involved and agree to what that ideal customer looks like. Is it a customer that's in the $5 million to $10 million range, or are we only focused on small to medium sized customers? Because if we're a small to medium sized organization, are we going to be able to compete with the big organizations out there? Or can we compete more about being nimble, about having those relationships? And that might mean looking at a different market. So it really needs to come from the leadership at the very top. It needs to come from sales of what they're seeing and how they're managing those conversations in the industry, and then from production standpoint, what's real, what's capable, and with all that input, then you can just kind of narrow it down into what's the ideal customer look like. But again, I kind of caution people not to get tunneled only on the personas, because sometimes a conversation will lead to a new line of business you hadn't thought about. But you have to be careful about not going on a rabbit trail. So I strongly believe in understanding your ideal market, ideal customers, having a persona to share with your entire organization so that everybody's on the same page. But then don't ignore other opportunities that might come in that just because they don't fall into that perfect form that you've created.
Nice. Switching gears a little bit, um, are print buyers asking about technology? Like, do they care about the kind of technology that their stuff is being produced on?
Oh gosh, I think it's still evolving. There were definitely days where a lot of print buyers were specking out what they wanted their print printed on. And that was the traditional print buyer. Again, what I'm finding today is that there's fewer and fewer people that only are responsible for buying print. They usually are department heads or people within departments that have that responsibility. And they probably don't have all the knowledge that the traditional print buyer had. And so they are just looking for, how can I get this done? When can I get it? And is it a good value? So I would say some might still be asking for the technology and understanding what you have to offer. I think, sadly, our sales people sometimes are still leading with that because that was important before. It really doesn't seem to have as much value to the person that's buying the print in today's world.
Right. Um, Print on demand.
Mm.
How is that impacting traditional printers right now? Are they integrating it into their processes?
Yeah, I read an article, and I think Keypoint Intelligence also has some data on this. That about I think in the U.S. about between 65 and 85, and don't quote me because I don't have the actual number, of commercial printers out there have a digital device. And so the digital device obviously is to create print on demand. Now, I will tell you that a lot of the press operators out there with the newer presses will tell you that they also do print on demand. And so it really comes down to identifying what that means to the customer. What does print on demand mean to you? And then kind of going backwards into that. But the printers out there that are looking at print on demand, really what they're trying to address is the urgency of the market need. And so it can be done on offset if they have 4 days. It can be done on digital if they have 2 or 3 days. Um, the print on demand has almost become a norm, but it doesn't mean print on demand equals digital all the time.
Hmm.
And I think that's a very important fact because we hear print on demand and we think inkjet, we think production print, presses, and we think that's the only way of doing it. There's still a lot of press operators out there that are and print companies are doing pretty well with their offset presses and being able to address print on demand. It just depends on what the application is and the time frame. So
Talking a little bit about technology, is how should print companies be evaluating new technology to add based on sales and marketing and positioning?
again, it kind of goes back to understanding who you serve in the market. Kind of going back to that, what does our best customer look like? And I think when you start considering different technologies, we're on the cusp right now of kind of divide it into three categories. You have the offset presses, you have the production presses with toner base, and then you've got the inkjet presses. And I think a lot of organizations that are looking to continue to build their businesses are kind of trying to figure out where they want to make their investments. And there's this huge uncertainty about, do I go from a electrophotographic device, toner based device to inkjet? Or how does that look for me? So the best way for them to make that decision, obviously, is to look at the current customers, to look at what the requirements are, even do a voice of the customer research with them. Where do you see your trends going in the future? What is it that you're concerned about? And then based on that, building what a good technology investment would look like for them. Salespeople obviously are very good voices of the customer, so that they have their feet on the ground all the time. They're hearing what the customer's needs are. When it comes to evaluating, What I am seeing most, and it's not as much as feature and function, although obviously page size and the sheet size is critical in today's world. What I'm seeing most is when organizations are looking to invest in a press or technology, is they're looking for somebody that's going to be with them for more than their 4-year lease. They're looking at someone that's going to be with them longer than that. The service and support they can get, the the strength that they can get from building their business. How can they connect through the people they're buying from? For example, like Dscoop, right? So how are they going to support my business once I make that investment? And that's becoming more and more critical today because there's so much competition. One of the things I love about organizations like Dscoop, this is not a commercial for you, it's not gratuitous at all, but it's a genuinely from my observation, is it builds community. And once you're in that community, there's a trust, and the people start sharing more, and they start getting better ideas from each other. And very rarely are they holding the cards so close to the chest that there's no value out of it. So I think when people are looking to buy, they're looking for that community so that they don't feel like they're alone, right? They don't feel like they're making this big investment without any support behind it. The technology part, it has to align with what you want to be in the market and what your customers' needs are. So, and that could be all over the board.
Right. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for growth in print over the next few years?
If you're talking applications, obviously the packaging is well spoken of, packaging labels. But I think even if you're not in that space, one of the areas, and we talked about this earlier, is just making print more effective. And we know that the spend is going to continue to go down incrementally, in customer communications and direct mail. So the opportunity there is to make that piece better, make that piece have better impact on a business and a brand. And the better a salesperson can communicate that and demonstrate that and bring ideas to the table, the more opportunity they're going to get. We laugh at Keypoint Intelligence. I guess it was about 8, 9 years ago, customer communications, transactional print was going to fall on its face. The next 3 years is going to fall on its face. Incrementally, it has not. I mean, it's continued to decline, but there's still a lot of transactional print that gets delivered to customers. And so it's finding ways to make that have more impact and the more profit. And that's, everybody wants profit. So, two different answers. If you're looking at applications and market segments, I would say packaging, obviously, that's proven in every research that's out there. And then the second answer to that would be, looking at the print that your customers do buy and making it more effective.
All right. My last question.
All right.
You're stuck at home. What's the one food dish that you're going to eat and what movie?
What movie? Oof. Food dish would be um, mm, a nice steamed mussels, like in a tomato base with some crunchy French bread. Love that. And the movie I'm going to watch. Gosh, I'm not a movie buff. What movie do I love? Well, my go-to when I'm doing chores is to put on Wizard of Oz. I think it's a fascinating movie for a lot of yeah, I love it for a lot of respects. I love that movie. Um, Not as big a fan of Wicked, but it's okay. Um, what movie? Gosh, I can't even think of one, Chris. I can't think of
You
a movie.
just did. What Wizard of Oz? That qualifies. Okay,
Okay,
and what
good.
now I got to drill down even further. Favorite character within the Wizard of
Oh,
Oz.
well, this is a little bit biased because I'm a Leo, and so I have to go with the lion.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome. Well, fantastic. This has been a great discussion. I really appreciate your time, Karen.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care.